Falcons fans, you've made it. You're finally gonna be good. I think. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 16 team in my 2024 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Atlanta Falcons. All this team wants is to win the worst division in football. And if signing Kirk Cousins at 36 years old coming off an Achilles injury is what it's going to take to get there, well, so be it. Here we are talking about if this is going to be enough. And frankly, I have them ranked the highest in this division, as those following the series know. So call me a believer in this Falcons team, but that doesn't mean this is a guarantee and there aren't plenty of question marks to talk about with this football team. So, going to be a fun one. Buckle up. Before we do get started, if you could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button down below. It really does help. It takes just a second, so thank you in advance. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of these deep dives as we lead up to the number one team in my power rankings heading into next season. But as always, let's take a look at this team's offseason, where they got better, where they got worse. Starting with the coaching staff, where I'm actually going to say to be determined. We just got the chance to talk about Arthur Smith in the Steelers deep dive a couple episodes ago, but he had his deficiencies when it came to roster management, player management, and ultimately the decision to go into last year with Desmond Ridder was primarily on him. So he had his issues, and I understand why they wanted to move off of him. I also don't know that he was the best leader of the organization as a head coach, but the offensive scheming was there from him. Not to mention, Ryan Nielsen did a really good job with this defense. I thought it was fascinating that they decided to hire a defensive head coach when their new defensive coordinator that they had just hired last year, I thought looked pretty good. And he got plucked up immediately by the Jags, who we just got to talk about in our last deep dive. But they bring in Raheem Morris as the new head coach here to oversee the defense and a first-time offensive play caller in Zach Robinson. I don't have any issues with these hires in a vacuum, but I'm not going to sit here and say this is guaranteed to be a better coaching staff than what they had in Atlanta. They're obviously hoping they will be. So I'm going to say to be determined on that. Falcons fans may or may not like that. But at quarterback, this one's obvious, massively upgraded. And putting this together was a reminder that last year I did this where I would color code the position groups that were some of the most upgraded position groups in the league. I would color code them in purple to highlight just how big of an upgrade this is. And that is the case with the quarterback room in Atlanta. Before you even get to the additions, kicking Desmond Ridder out the door might be an upgrade in its own right, but you bring in Kirk Cousins, the highest paid free agent in this cycle, and spend a first-round pick on Michael Penix. They said, no more of that. They knew they got the worst quarterback play in the NFL last year. It was the reason that they did not make the playoffs last year, and double-dipped at this position group. We will talk more about the Michael Penix draft pick. Obviously, one of the more polarizing draft picks in this most recent draft. We'll talk more about that when we get to the quarterback section of the roster breakdown. But as far as looking back on this offseason, was quarterback upgraded? Yes, and this is the single biggest upgrade when you consider that it's the quarterback room and how important that position is. This is the single biggest upgrade that any team made in the entire NFL. And if you're wondering how the hell the Falcons made the top half of my power rankings heading into next season, this is pretty much your answer right here. But the rest of the offensive roster at running back, staying neutral. They do say goodbye to Cordarrelle Patterson. They spent a 6th-round pick on Jace McClellan out of Alabama, but their two primary backs are still here. At tight end, some players moving hands, but nothing I'm worried about. Jonnu Smith and Michael Pruitt, two of Arthur Smith's teacher's pets, if you will, no longer here, and they bring in some better blockers in Charlie Warner and Ross Dwelly. Certainly makes sense next to Kyle Pitts, but overall I'm saying neutral with the tight end room. Smith and Pruitt can play a little bit. At wide receiver, obvious upgrades here as well, in my opinion. Mac Hollins, Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, none of them settled in as impactful starters for this team. And they go ahead and bring in Darnell Mooney as a well-paid wide receiver too in free agency. They also were able to get Rondale Moore for Desmond Ridder. Look, Rondale Moore has had his issues in Arizona, but if you can get a useful gadget player for a literal garbage quarterback, sure, why not? And then a 6th-round pick in Casey Washington as well. Offensive line, literally no movement at all. They like this group, keeping it all the same, rounding out the offensive offseason that was obviously very good. Massive upgrades at quarterback and upgrades at wide receiver, staying neutral everywhere else. Not too shabby for an offensive unit that was already pretty good outside of quarterback last year. But then you look at the defense, and they weren't quite as busy on this side of the ball. Starting with the interior of the defensive line, this group is upgraded. All they're losing is Albert Huggins, 28% of their snaps as a rotational piece last year. But they spent a 2nd-round pick on Rook Arororo out of Clemson. Was a reach, in my opinion, but still a nice player. Better than what they had in Albert Huggins alone there. But they also spent a 4th-round pick on Brandon Dorlus, who I do expect to rush from the inside at least on passing downs when he's on the field. And Grady Jarrett, coming back from an ACL injury. Looks like he's good to go there. He only played 28% of their snaps last year. So the interior of the defensive line should be better. But on the edge, I do list Calais Campbell there because in Nielsen's system, he was primarily a 5-tech and an edge piece. That's a big loss right there. He, at 37 years old, continued to play well and was their best defensive lineman, at least on the edge last year, if not overall. They also lose Bud Dupree, another 64% of their snaps last year. And really all they did there was bring in Braylon Trice in the 3rd round. Can factor in a little bit of Brandon Dorlus there as well, who I think will play some off the edge. But for me, this is a downgrade for an edge group that was already one of the worst in the league. So that's definitely going to raise some questions when we get to the defensive breakdown for the team. At linebacker, no change there, staying neutral. At cornerback, some moving pieces. Jeff Okudah out the door, played half their snaps last year. He struggled. And really all they did there was bring in Antonio Hamilton from Arizona and Kevin King. I did think about being generous and saying slightly upgraded there. Antonio Hamilton actually played pretty well for Arizona last year, but he's not currently slated to start, and any positive thing you can say about the Antonio Hamilton addition is immediately wiped away by the fact that they think Kevin King is rosterable. Safety as well, staying neutral with no change in that group. And then for the special teams, you got to at least note that they lose Cordarrelle Patterson, arguably the best kick returner in the history of the NFL. So I did put special teams as downgraded. So this was certainly a polarizing offseason. I mean, obviously, it's a net positive, a fairly large net positive, just because quarterback matters that much, and you got to love going to bring in Kirk Cousins. And that's reflected by me having them in the top half of my overall power rankings as the highest ranked team in the NFC South. So it's hard to be really negative on this team's offseason, but I'm not going to lie, man. Move for move, this was not my favorite offseason out there. The Michael Penix pick was weird, but when we reviewed their draft in my draft grades video, I thought they reached on Ruka Rororo, could have done even more after making the Michael Penix pick. We looked at their offseason for the defense. They really didn't spend any money there, and in my opinion, are ignoring some holes on that side of the ball. And the coaching hire. I know we all want to sit here and be positive about Raheem Morris, but it's far from a slam dunk hire as well. So did they position themselves well in the NFC South by going to get Kirk Cousins? Yes, but could they have positioned themselves even more in the actual NFC by doing a little bit more? I would argue yes. So I do at least want to point that out, even though we're being mostly positive on this Falcons team for their 2024 outlook. But let's talk about that coaching staff. And for those looking at the graphic here, you might say, what the heck? I thought this was the Falcons deep dive. Why are all these guys in Rams gear? Well, that's because all of these dudes are coming over from the Rams. Head coach Raheem Morris, his sidekick Jimmy Lake, and offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, first-time play caller here. And look, anytime you hire a defensive coordinator to be your head coach, it has to come with the disclaimer that you're just reducing the upside for the hire. Not only are you taking a shot at the young, ascending offensive minds around the league that could give you a shot at getting that Mike McDaniel, that Matt LaFleur, Kevin O'Connell. One of the biggest cheat codes you can have in the NFL right now is to have that offensive guru in charge of your offense in this offensive league. So not only are you electing to not take a chance at getting that guy, but that also means that the offensive coordinator you're picking from is from the next rung, the next level of candidates. You can't steal other offensive coordinators to be your offensive coordinator. So you have to go find position coaches and highly recommended minds that have, for the most part, never called plays before. Or you got to go with the retread offensive coordinators that have lost jobs and failed, right? And that can work, but the problem with that is if you do hit on a diamond in the rough, a guy like a Zach Robinson, a hire that I actually like here, he's gone in 2 years. He's going to go be a head coach for someone else. And you don't even have to look outside of Atlanta for the last time that this screwed over a team that had a defensive-minded head coach. They had Dan Quinn. I said, fire him. Keep Kyle Shanahan. Open your eyes. Look what happened. It's been 4 years of gross in Atlanta since then. You are setting yourself up for that scenario all over again here. So you always have to look at that disclaimer when you hire a defensive head coach, and I'm always going to shade towards give me the offensive-minded guy. Now, there are aspects of this hire that I like. Number one, I do like Raheem Morris. I think in a vacuum, he deserves another shot as a head coach. 15 years ago, he got handed the absolute leftover hand-me-downs of that John Gruden kind of Tampa 2 championship team. He was like super young. Like I want to say he was like 32. He was not ready for it. It was ugly. And then he spent 15 years trying to rebuild his candidacy, and he's totally done that. I think he's a player's coach. I think from a culture perspective, this is going to be an upgrade. And from an ability to look at your team, come together with a game plan, weekly cohesion, team chemistry, all that, I believe in Raheem Morris from that side of things. And I believe in him from a defensive side of things. So I do think he's qualified to be a head coach in the league, even if it's not the most exciting hire in the world. But I also can see where they look at this and say, okay, our division sucks. We got to raise the floor of our organization. We got to bring in a veteran quarterback at 36 years old. And then you're going to pair it with Zach Robinson, who runs the same offense that Kirk Cousins has been dominating with under Kevin O'Connell, who came from Sean McVay. It's the same exact offense. Pair him with Zach Robinson. The offense should be pretty status quo. The defense will be well run. And for the next 2 years or so, until someone else in this division becomes a real player in the NFC, this could actually work. And again, that's reflected in me having this team ranked pretty favorably. But, I mean, what this boils down to is, would I bet on Raheem Morris being the head coach of the 2028 Atlanta Falcons? I wouldn't. I do think if this works, you're talking about maybe like a slightly elevated version of what the Saints have gone for in the Derek Carr regime, where you win the division, maybe you win a playoff game or two, Zach Robinson gets hired elsewhere, you move on from Kirk Cousins to Michael Penix, and then what? I don't know. I'm getting way ahead of ourselves here, but that's in the back of my mind when I think about the Raheem Morris hire. But for the next 2 years, can this structure make sense and work for this Falcons team? Yes, absolutely. So there's sides of it that I understand. There's sides of it for me that I just say, that's just not the direction I would have gone with. And I would love for nothing else than for him to come in and be one of the truly elite defensive minds and for this team to win a Super Bowl under Raheem Morris, because I'm going to enjoy pulling for these guys. That's just kind of where I'm at on the hire. But let's shift away from that kind of like macro conversation about this hire and talk more about what Raheem Morris is as a defensive coordinator, defensive head coach. And another reason I'm just like kind of lukewarm on this hire is I think he's a really good defensive coordinator. But if you're going to hire a defensive head coach, I certainly want it to be how we feel about Mike McDonald, for example. Someone that I think can reasonably become a truly elite defensive mind. Do I ultimately think Raheem Morris is an elite defensive mind? No, I think he's a very good defensive coach. And in terms of his rankings, I have him in that cluster of very good pass game defensive coaching, 7th to 17th, and then much more just average for run defense coaching in a big cluster, 17th to 30th, in with teams where their run defense coaching seems fine, but not that they really do anything special there. You put those two together and, you look at the math and say, all right, so you hire Raheem Morris and he's, like the 17th or 18th best defensive coach in the league right now? I think that's probably about right. He did do a good job with that Rams defense over the last 2 years, but they certainly weren't world beaters. And I do think he's going to have to prove in Atlanta that he is more than just a very good defensive coach and that he can be an elite defensive coach. Only time will tell on that. From a schematic point of view, we can talk about what he has called and what he did call with the Rams, but I think in terms of what he's going to call for the Falcons, this could look different. And I say that because you look at his track record and he has ran really everything from a schematic point of view. He goes all the way back to those elite Tampa 2 defenses in Tampa 2, a lot of cover 2, winning with a great front 4 on 4-man rushes, coached for Jim Haslett in the early teens, and then went over to coach for Dan Quinn in that Seattle 3 structured defense. And then you could even argue another coaching tree influence is Vic Fangio and Brandon Staley, because when he got to the Rams, he kind of abandoned everything he had ran in the past and pivoted towards doing a lot more of that off zone, a lot of cover 3, decent amount of quarters, cover 6, more of that 3-4 structured front that, isn't really in his history in the Tampa Bay and Atlanta days. So I don't think it's a lock that he comes in and does exactly what he did for the Rams. And I think until we see what he wants to do, you just got to expect this to be very multiple. Can't say with any certainty if it's going to be primarily a 3-4 base defense or a 4-3 base defense. I can't rule out him blitzing more with a bad defensive line and not having Aaron Donald anymore. I can't rule out him just running a lot of stunts and doing what Dan Quinn has done over the last few years to elevate a defensive line while still rushing with 4. From a coverage perspective, he could stick with what he's done and run a lot of quarters, or he could say, hey, I got A.J. Terrell. That's a corner I didn't have with the Rams. Let's play more man coverage, play more cover 3, press, that kind of stuff. Again, his defense with the Rams the last 2 years was very much a Fangio, Staley-inspired 3-4 quarters heavy, or at least off-zone heavy. They actually ran a lot of cover 3 instead of quarters, but very much in that family. But only time will tell what type of scheme we're going to see here. And then you can mention Jimmy Lake, his sidekick here, following him over from the Rams. He's been with Raheem really throughout his career, was with him for a little bit in Tampa Bay under Monty Kiffin, and again with him when Raheem Morris was the head coach in 2009 and 2010. He's also coached about 20 years in the college ranks, got all the way up to being the head coach at Washington and was let go for some player misconduct, kind of getting into it with his players on the football field. I'm not too familiar with that incident, but he did have a falling out in Washington, now back as a defensive coordinator in the NFL. But we do got to talk about the offensive coordinator hire. Honestly, there's just not a ton to say here. This is very much in line with the type of hires that have worked around the league. Go find the young coaches that are coaching for the Rams or for the Niners and steal them before they become offensive coordinators for someone else or head coaches for someone else. And that's exactly what they're doing in Zach Robinson, who is one of these hires that makes me feel like I'm getting old because I remember him throwing to Des Bryant at Oklahoma State and Very reminiscent with the new college football game out. Used to play with those guys in like NCAA 08, 09, whatever year that was. But he's been coaching for the Rams after being a backup quarterback in the NFL for a few years. But he's been coaching for Sean McVay for the last 4 years. You can fully expect this to be, especially with Kirk Cousins here, a wide zone, play action oriented passing game. We talk about these offenses 2 out of 3 deep dives because this is the meta in the NFL right now. And like I said, there's no reason to believe that the Zach Robinson hire will not work out. It's just he's never called plays before. He's super young. He's got to prove himself, and I can't rank him too highly in terms of offensive coaching. They rank 25th to 28th for pass game coaching and 22nd to 26th for run game coaching, which is honestly, I think, pretty favorable for a guy that is so young and has never called plays before. Like, I actually think this is going to work. In a year from now, we could be talking about Zach Robinson in the same light as maybe a Bobby Slowick or how we talked about Dave Canales this last offseason. These coaching rankings can climb, and then he's going to get a head coaching job probably in 2026. And the Falcons do this whole rodeo all over again. Hate to end it on that note, but that's where we are going to end this conversation on the coach and scheme. Ultimately, I'm not going to sit here and say this is the best staff in the NFL, but I think these guys can climb these ranks and be a good enough staff to at least, get this team to accomplish their goals this year of making the playoffs, maybe winning a playoff game. As far as saying, is this a Super Bowl championship caliber staff? I think you are getting ahead of yourself there. We'll see. But let's shift to the roster conversation, starting with the quarterback room. And I think the goal with Kirk Cousins coming in is for the Falcons to get top half in the league quarterback play. And I think Kirk Cousins over the last 2 years before the Achilles injury has played as a top 10 quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. But you factor in some guys getting back healthy, some young ascending quarterbacks, the fact that he's changing teams, going to have to, learn things, learn chemistry with a new set of wide receivers, and most importantly is 36 years old coming off an Achilles injury, playing as well for a first-time offensive play caller. And I think you can knock that down from top 10 to where I have them ranked 15th overall at quarterback heading into the season, 13th in passing, and then passed up just a little bit by some guys like we talked about with Kyler Murray, as we'll see with Jalen Hurts, guys that surpass Kirk Cousins' overall ranking because of the multiplier they bring in the run game. And Kirk Cousins has really impressed me the last couple of years. I think he has, ascended a tier, basically, from being sort of that Dalton line or maybe where like Derek Carr is right now, just being such a generic, basic, boring, mid quarterback. I think he's more than mid, right? He's good. And I think really over the last 2 years, getting super familiar with this system, really, what he ran in Minnesota and what he will continue to run here in Atlanta, he has reached that top 5 processing and decision-making level among quarterbacks in the NFL. And I'm not about to say that he is as good as Tom Brady, obviously, but Tom Brady eventually reached that level where he had just seen everything and knew the answers to every single blitz and coverage and disguised coverage and scheme that a defense could throw at you. Kirk Cousins has kind of reached that point where now just short of 10,000 career snaps into his career, like he is so consistently going to the right place with the ball, throwing with anticipation into zone windows, reducing the amount of times he's putting the ball in harm's way, which you go back 6 years ago, and his turnover-worthy play percentage would have been about double what it is now. Not to mention what he can do pre-snap, shifting lines, making checks, making adjustments, all that. I think we really have seen Kirk evolve and continue to get better as a quarterback. Now, is that going to continue? Probably not. I think it's pretty much maxed out at this point, but he has impressed me in that way. Another area he's impressed me is I do think he's gotten so much more comfortable managing the rush and showing better pocket presence. That's not always something that improves, but I do think it's a case study in that when you play this much and you have this continuity, you do reach a comfort level where he's not thinking as much and can feel the rush a little bit more. And we've seen him avoid sacks much better than he ever has, mostly by knowing where his outlets are. Like, he has been actually really annoying. Like, as a Packers fan, having to watch my team go against Kirk Cousins so much the last couple of years, where you really feel a big difference with him is, you go back 4 or 5 years ago, you get pressure on Kirk, you were going to sack him. Now it's like he always knows where that little hole in the zone is, where his guy's going to be, or he knows where his dump down is, and he can just sidestep a sack, get rid of the ball, keep a drive alive, and oftentimes convert a big third down. That's been kind of an it factor that he's shown as well. He can even be a sneaky scrambler at times to pick things up with his feet. So is he the most explosive quarterback option? No, he has a very average arm. He is probably the least mobile quarterback in the NFL among starters currently. There is a reduced upside, but he is a really good quarterback. He deserves every cent he got in free agency. I think he is one of these quarterbacks that you can win a Super Bowl with if everything is right around him. And the other thing is, considering you go back 3 years ago, the beat on Kirk Cousins was primetime Kirk sucks. He can't win Monday Night Football. He's never won a playoff game. He doesn't show up in big moments. He's been like big game Kirk over the last 2 years. And I think everything we talked about with him kind of evolving and taking that next step as a quarterback has led to a lot of those big wins. So totally on board with this signing. The only real concern is the Achilles. Is he able to get the same velocity that he always has? Can he sidestep those sacks and show what little mobility he does have? Can he, he still needs to move a little bit as a quarterback to do some of the stuff that makes him a plus quarterback. Can he fully recover from that? That's kind of the major question here, but they seem pretty damn confident that he's going to be just fine. Modern medicine is seemingly a miracle with these Achilles injuries, and I think there's plenty of reason to believe that my ranking of him as the 13th best passing quarterback in the NFL can hold up just fine here. And hell, there might even be a little bit more in there if you can prove he's fully healthy and prove that everything's going to work here with these receivers, the new play caller and all of that, for him to kind of be the 11th or 10th best passing quarterback in the league. Wouldn't say he's going to be much more than that, but I think you get the point. But then we do got to talk about Michael Penix and the Michael Penix draft pick. Now, we broke this down in my draft grades video, so I don't want to be overly redundant there. But, I mean, when this pick happened, it was just weird, right? And I think myself and pretty much everybody else just didn't even know what to say, because it would be easy if everything about this draft pick just reeked. If it was a huge reach, or if you didn't see a path for him to play in the next few years, or if he didn't make sense with this team, it'd be easy to just destroy the draft pick, bash on the Falcons, and say this was a complete waste. But there's sides to this pick that I do kind of like, or at least don't hate. Like, look, I unfortunately had to watch the Falcons play football last year too. And seeing Desmond Ridder suit up for this team made my eyes bleed. The amount of games that he single-handedly lost by turning the ball over in the red zone or spraying throws to a wide-open Kyle Pitts was infuriating. So just from a fundamental point of view, for the Falcons to want to go into this offseason and say, never again on that, I understand that line of thinking. You also have to factor in that Kirk Cousins is not a full guarantee to be his old self. He's not a full guarantee that he's going to stay healthy. We seem to just chalk it up nowadays that 36 years old is nothing for a quarterback. They can keep playing until they're 40, but maybe not everybody is Tom Brady and made of adamantium. So there is a very solid line of thinking that this is good insurance for the big ticket price you paid on Kirk Cousins. I mean, just think about last season with the Jets. Like, Aaron Rodgers goes down and their season was just over. If something did happen to Kirk Cousins, your season's not over. You're in a better spot than you were last year with Michael Penix. And then you factor in, like, okay, we can actually maybe establish some long-term continuity. There is something to be said about the teams that have a plan, a 2-3 year plan at quarterback, let a guy develop, get familiar within a system. And if you're looking 2 years down the road and saying, all right, Zach Robinson is going to get a head coaching job and Kirk Cousins is going to be 38 years old, well, maybe we can establish some continuity here. Michael Penix can really get comfortable with this system. TJ Yates, our new quarterback coach, can be the long-term answer as the Zach Robinson replacement, and you have a actual plan 2 or 3 years down the road. That's some of that culture and chemistry and team planning stuff that perhaps Raheem Morris with Terry Fontenot are bringing to the table here that you weren't getting from an Arthur Smith. And just that one draft pick doesn't mean that they can't compete with Kirk Cousins. Now, those things I all get. So like I said, I don't hate this pick in its entirety, but there's some stuff here. I mean, I do think there were real difference makers at the top of this draft at premium positions of need, corner, edge, interior defensive line. All could have helped this defense substantially. But it's even more than that, like to actually talk about who Michael Penix is as a prospect a little bit. I'm not 100% sure that he is that dude. I mean, you can never be 100% sure on any quarterback prospect, but Michael Penix to me was like late first, early second in my mind. I was comfortable with him. So the draft pick alone was a little early. Granted, it sounds like there were other teams in the NFL, more quarterback desperate teams, mind you, that were going to take him before that. But for me, it's like, all right, like we'll get an opportunity to draft a Michael Penix type of prospect again in the future. But people have compared this to the Jordan Love pick. And for me, not only did I have a much higher grade on Jordan Love, he was my number 2 quarterback in that draft. And for the Packers, it was just a situation where the prospect was too good to pass him up in that situation. I don't feel that way about Michael Penix with the 8th pick or whatever it ended up being. And that's a really good transition to who he is as a prospect, I guess starting with his weaknesses. He is 24 years old. His biggest knock was durability. And for me, he is a very limited upside quarterback. I mean, you talk about Jordan Love, like this is a guy that made plays with his feet, sensed pressure, navigated the rush, did a lot of high upside stuff. Michael Penix, everything he did was from clean pockets, inside the pocket, to a truly elite set of wide receivers and an elite play caller and an elite offensive line. With Michael Penix, when the rush did get in, there was no play extension at all. To his credit, he's good at sensing it. He's good at getting rid of the ball and not taking sacks, but that's throwing the ball away sometimes on 3rd down or taking a check down on 3rd down or just putting it out there for a Roma Dunze against Pac-12 competition to just go make a play. And that's fine. That can get you Derek Carr. Maybe it can get you Kirk Cousins. But is that similar to Jordan Love or like drafting Patrick Mahomes with the 10th overall pick? Is that like you're stashing a potentially elite quarterback that can grow into that dude in time? I don't see it. Really hope I'm wrong, but I'm just telling you that's what I saw in the film. I think he's a very likable quarterback. The ball pops off his arm. He's got a great arm. He reads defenses. He's super accurate. There is stuff to like. Again, if someone took him in the first round, I would understand it. And the Falcons did take him in the first round, and I talked about some of the things I understand about it. But it was a very, very split feeling on this draft pick. And unfortunately, we're going to have to wait like at least 2 years probably to find out. And, opinions are all over the place. I would love for you guys to put in the comments down below, 3 months removed from the draft now, how do you feel about the Michael Penix draft pick? It's an interesting one. And as we wrap up the quarterback conversation, even Taylor Heineke is still here, who immediately becomes one of the best QB3s in the league, for whatever that's worth. But obviously the Falcons are so much better off at quarterback, not just with Kirk, but even Michael Penix, I think, would play better than Desmond Ridder did last year. And if they can get, as I'm ranking them, the 15th overall quarterback in the NFL, that's going to be worth the money. They're probably going to win this division, and ultimately this signing will look pretty good. But let's talk about the weapons, and this is really the main reason that if Kirk Cousins is healthy and looks like his old self, this team's probably going to win the division, because this is an awesome group of weapons. Still some unproven aspects of it, so they don't quite rank top 5, but they do rank with a B+ grade, 7th to 12th for me, which might not even sound that high, but I mean, you contextualize that with how many great groups of weapons there are in the NFL, that's pretty damn good. And I think this team even has the potential to be a top 5 group of weapons, to finish the year looking back on this being like, this is up there with teams like the Eagles and the Vikings and some of those truly elite groups of weapons. But if that's going to happen, it comes down to Drake London and Kyle Pitts reaching their upside as top 10 draft picks now that they have an actual NFL caliber quarterback throwing them the football, which has not been the case in either of the last 2 seasons with Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder, and Taylor Heineke. I mean, really, this trifecta from a pass game perspective is why you can get excited about the Falcons offense. Trifecta being Drake London, Pitts, and Kirk Cousins. But let's start with Drake London. I talked about him in last year's Falcons deep dive about really how wrong I feel like I was about him as a prospect. I didn't hate him as a prospect, but I did think he was a lower upside wide receiver, and I certainly do not feel that way about him anymore, watching him and his NFL tape. I mean, a much better route runner than I ever thought he would be. I always liked his routes from the slot, but he's been able to step outside, and the way he can shake a corner on a comebacker and leave guys in the dust when he breaks on a dig, how physical he is running slants on a tough 3rd and 4. And it's not just the routes, it's the release package as well. I mean, he has crazy quick feet for such a big wide receiver, and he weaponizes that extremely well. And that shows up after the catch as well, where he's got a really good juke move. He's got good contact balance. He's got the length to put on a stiff arm. And then you talk about the size and the basketball background, the contested catch ability. That was always going to be there, but when that's just a part of the list of compliments on him as opposed to how I felt about him as a prospect, where I thought that was his like main and kind of only selling point was the size and the ball skills. That's when you're really talking about a potentially special wide receiver. Now, he's not really a vertical threat, and that's why I think some people compare him to Mike Evans being in this division. He's not really Mike Evans. He still doesn't have the long speed that even a Mike Evans has. And frankly, there's not really a great pro comp for him. I think the closest player that he plays to is something maybe like Keenan Allen. And Keenan Allen, like we talked about in the Bears deep dive, he has fluctuated between being like either a 1A or a 1B. He's never really been that like truly elite alpha, but I think Drake London can get to that level. And I would maybe even bet on him doing that this year. But he's phenomenal. And then you have Kyle Pitts. And he's obviously another very fun conversation. One of the best college football prospects I've watched since doing that. And unfortunately in the NFL, that talent has much more only shown up in flashes and spurts than it has in any sort of consistent manner. Now, you go back to when he had Matt Ryan, a diminished version of Matt Ryan, 3 years ago in his rookie season as a tight end, where we know rookie tight ends tend to struggle, unless you're named Sam Laporta, apparently. But he looked the part in his rookie season. Over 1,000 yards. Granted, only 1 touchdown, but he had to play with, even though Matt Ryan was better than what he's worked with, Matt Ryan is the worst red zone quarterback in the history of the NFL, in my opinion. Maybe not named Derek Carr. But that's where the 1 touchdown came in. But what I'm getting at is last time he was healthy and had a functional quarterback, he was a 1,000-yard weapon as a rookie. Since then, he's dealt with Arthur Smith not knowing how to use him. Even when he does draw up open looks for Kyle Pitts, more often than not, Desmond Ridder was sailing it over his head, which is impressive considering he's 6'6" and can jump out the gym. But Ridder, Mariota, honestly, a lot of people bashed Arthur Smith for not finding ways to get Kyle Pitts, but a lot of times the targets were there, the schemed up looks were there, and the quarterback just wouldn't hit him. So a lot of his production, you can point to the truly horrific quarterback play that he's dealt with. And a lot of the lack of production you can also point to last year where he just wasn't healthy. You watch his tape last year in the second half of the year, and he looked a lot slower than the Kyle Pitts I certainly know and love. So you do got to get him back to full speed. I don't think they're too worried about that. But then, there's just been some inconsistent moments from him. Really just all over the place type of stuff, whether it's getting sluggish on the occasional route. Frankly, how he is a bit of a tweener. I mean, they still kind of struggle where it's like, well, we should probably still put his hand in the dirt and play him as tight end occasionally. And he is truly one of the most putrid run blockers for the tight end position you'll ever see. And just in terms of scheming up an offense, that provides complications. There's been some moments with his ball skills too, where they're trusting him to be that dude that can go moss a defender, and he doesn't always do it. I mean, he's had a 39% contested catch percentage in his 3 years for the Falcons. Sure as hell isn't the 58% that he had at Florida. So it's not all just quarterback play and injuries. There are some knocks on his game. But I'm still a big believer in Kyle Pitts, at least for him to emerge as a really high-end number 2 piece in this offense. I think another question is just how is Zach Robinson going to use him? Is he a big slot? Is he outside? Is he a wing tight end in more of the Jonnu Smith role? Now that they've brought in some actual blocking tight ends to be the tight ends, whereas Arthur Smith was like, no, Jonnu Smith is the Jonnu Smith role, is that wing tight end. So the overall conversation on him does just go in a lot of different directions. But I think even the Kyle Pitts haters at this point that are frustrated with his fantasy output are still going to defend the talent. Not to mention he's heading towards his contract. That motivation is picking up for him too. So definitely still a believer. But he doesn't have to do it all either. I do actually really like the Darnell Mooney signing. As much as I questioned aspects of this team's offseason, this made so much sense to me. So the Falcons actually, for a lot of the season, kind of treated Kyle Pitts as the deep threat. And he can do some of that stuff, but it's not really his game. He's more good on crossers and digs and corners and like an intermediate monster. Whereas throwing him a bunch of deep posts and go balls down the sideline isn't always the best way to use Kyle Pitts. That's now Darnell Mooney. And, they messed around with Scotty Miller and Van Jefferson in this type of role, but now they're upgrading that spot. So within this offense, it makes a ton of sense. And then what a fit for Darnell Mooney, where he can go back to having a quarterback that will actually look at him. People will point to his fall off at the end of his Bears career. And boy, sure does make a lot of sense when the quarterback who everybody says doesn't look at his number 2 read is then given a better number 1 wide receiver. It sure does make sense that the other wide receiver no longer sees the football. And the film tells you that exact same story. Darnell Mooney was towards the top of the league in separation per route run, yet strange, the targets didn't come there. So I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air for Darnell Mooney to have a quarterback that can distribute the ball and utilize backside digs and alerts off a post, play within the timing of some of these deep crosses that will be a part of this offense. He makes a ton of sense for what they need to take the top off the defense. He was at a point in time a 1,000-yard receiver for the Bears, looked like a huge steal in the draft. Someone that I said could be something like a Brandon Cooks from a skill set perspective, and I think he can get back on that trajectory. A really nice signing here that I think they were able to get for less because Justin Fields can't read a defense. So I frankly love that. And then the rest of these pieces make a ton of sense too. I think Bijan's the next guy you talk about. such a dynamic receiving back, showed a million flashes early on in his rookie season. I mean, you just know that this dude can be like a supercharged Alvin Kamara. There's moments where, I mean, he shows just these fluid hands, the ability to catch and turn into a runner after the catch so easily, even when he's like one-handing some of these balls, the shiftiness after the catch. I mean, some of his best plays, or at least highlight missed tackles forced. That's always a tough stat to get off the tongue, but just his ability to juke a slot corner or a linebacker or whatever towards the flat and turn a 3rd and 6 dump down into a first down was really impressive. We saw at Texas, he ran posts and lined up at wide receiver. They were just scratching the surface of that with him for the Falcons. The only thing is he had drops, 5 of them, and had some moments in the first half of the season where his pass protection wasn't up to snuff. I think he started to take that more seriously and held up better in that phase, but that's really like it. Just clean up the drops, become a little bit better as a pass protector, and you are probably talking about someone that can be someone that could be like an all-decade caliber receiving back. I don't think he'll quite be like what Christian McCaffrey is, where he's just like legitimately a wide receiver when he's out there, but something like an Alvin Kamara, very much in his potential wheelhouse. And then you have Rondale Moore, who's just kind of here for fun. Honestly, Kadarius Hodge in a lot of their 11 personnel, and Kyle Pitts will be a wide receiver a lot of the time. So like Rondale Moore is really only a gadget guy coming in here for free because they didn't need Desmond Ridder. But they should find fun ways to get him the ball. I mean, their teams are going to be so preoccupied with, where Kyle Pitts is coming from, where Bijan's coming from, that, Rondale Moore on a jet sweep or a bubble screen and just kind of being a forgotten man, like he can still have his usefulness within this offense. So I like the acquisition. If he had to be, if someone went down and he had to be more than that, he's not that guy. But Kadarius Hodge is a solid backup. He's actually been really efficient when he's played. I kind of like him for what he is. So he's a good, wide receiver 4.5, if you will. And then you got Casey Washington, 6th-round pick who I didn't get to, and Ray McLeod may or may not make this team for special teams. And then a whole bunch of undrafted types. But that rounds out your wide receiver room. With the tight end depth, it's all blocking types for the most part. I like the Charlie Warner signing. We already kind of hinted at this, but it was always a little muddy with both Pitts and Jonnu Smith, who are both like that. If you are going to play them with their hand in the dirt, you want them as a flex tight end, off the line, not with his hand in the dirt, having to dig out a defensive end. Well, now they have their backup tight ends are actually those types. Charlie Warner, John Fitzpatrick, much better run blocking guys. Virtually nothing brought to the table as a receiving threat, but that's fine. You don't need them to do that. So I think from a roster construction standpoint, that's much more sound. And Ross Dwelly has played well for the Niners as well. He's a little more undersized, but he's blocked his ass off as well. So they make sense. Just don't expect them to get the ball a whole lot. And then with the backup running backs, you're hoping to see a lot less of Tyler Algier in the receiving game and really feature Bijan, but really good pass protector. If you really want to keep the back end to block, he's probably still going to get out there. And he's got sure hands. He's not a waste of time out there as a 3rd down back. He's just not exciting like Bijan. And then Avery Williams has some juice as a converted slot corner. Jace McClellan, a 6th-round pick. Really to be determined there. That rounds out your group of weapons. So, I mean, we rank these groups near their floor, and the Falcons come in ranking 7th to 12th with a very high grade. But again, this could be even better, getting to work with Kirk. They've invested 3 top 10 picks in these guys that they expect to be superstars, and all 3 of them very much could have the arrow still pointing up on London, Pitts, and Bijan. So, exciting group, man. I can't wait to see this all come together here. But the beauty of this series is we don't get to talk about Bijan Robinson just once. We get to talk about him twice as we talk about the running back room, where the Falcons rank 2nd to 5th at running back. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to stick my neck out and just say Bijan's number 2 already in the league. But we are doing our best to not give any one team, one player, one position group a certain benefit of the doubt. And you look at how Bijan played in his rookie season. Not that he was a full disappointment, but certainly wasn't what I painted the picture of, where he would step in and be the best running back in the NFL immediately. He wasn't too far behind that, but certainly from a production standpoint, having to split a lot of time with Tyler Algier didn't get to fully prove that. And there were some moments, some fumbles, the occasional bad decision in terms of indecisiveness, though that was very few and far between, and we're putting that within the context of could he be the best running back in the NFL. Still love his vision and think he's going to get a chance to prove that he does have elite vision at the NFL level now here in year 2. Think he can clean up the fumbles as well. We've seen that from some of the game's great running backs. Adrian Peterson had a bunch of fumbles early in his career. I want to say that was a big problem for Jonathan Taylor as well. I think he will work on that. And then besides that, it's like, just give the dude the damn football more. Let Bijan eat. You didn't draft him in the top 10 to split carries with Tyler Algier, with all due respect to Tyler Algier, but Bijan every bit looked the part of that elite running back prospect, really the best running back prospect I've ever seen, even ahead of Saquon Barkley. You definitely saw that dude on the film. It just wasn't quite as often as you would have hoped to see. Thanks, Arthur Smith. But you rattle off all of the strengths that he has, the speed, the acceleration. To me, his best trait, the foot speed, the agility, the jump cut to make guys miss in space, but also change lanes when he needs to. All there. I think he has above average power considering he is such an athletic running back. He'll stiff arm you. He'll spin move on you. He'll just put his head down and fight for tough yardage when he needs to. And I also need to say that I think with teams having to respect the passing game more this year, it's definitely going to open things up for Bijan, because teams knew when they were trying to feed Bijan, and there were a lot of carries where he was just getting stuffed. And even the games, Hall of Fame running backs were going to have their TFLs on them when teams are just completely selling out. So you're hoping that'll come down a little bit next year too. Ultimately, I anticipate a monster season from Bijan Robinson. I'm not going to say he can overtake Christian McCaffrey. That's just disrespectful to what Christian did last year. But anything short of that, I 100% know Bijan is capable of emerging as the number 2 and would frankly bet on him to do so, given what we've already talked about with the Falcons and what we're still going to talk about with their run blocking. I think the world of him. I'm anticipating more from him this year and certainly think he is someone that will elevate this Falcons run game. And then you got Tyler Algier, one of the best RB2s in the league. There is, for what it's worth, a reason he was getting all those carries last year. He's still very good in his own right. He would start for 10 other teams in the league. Great vision, great power and contact balance. He is a really nice complement to Bijan Robinson. You just want that split to come down. It was about a 66-34% split last year. I think you want that to probably slide another 10%. Make it a 3-1 split in favor of Bijan. But when Tyler's out there, you can't take the foot off the gas as a defense. You still have to bring it as a tackler. You still have to account for him in really every phase, because he can do stuff in the receiving game as well. And he's coming off the bench with a lot to prove. Would love to give him a little truth serum and ask what he thinks about them drafting a running back after he ran for 1,000 yards as a rookie. But he's just a couple years removed from hitting free agency. So just not a single bad word to say about this running back room other than just Bijan fumble less, I guess. But this group's awesome. The depth stinks. You got Avery Williams, who is a converted slot corner. I mean, he's got some juice, but still very much a project. And then Jace McClellan, considering he was an Alabama running back, I wanted to like him a lot more, but just really bad vision and not elite traits. So kind of whatever in the 6th round. And then very little to say as well about the QB run multiplier. You're not getting any from Kirk Cousins. If it were Michael Penix in there, I think they could mix in a read option once a game or so. You don't want him taking a bunch of hits because he's had durability concerns. But when Washington did decide to run him, He is an underrated athlete and can beat you that way. But let's talk about this offensive line, which is another reason I'm excited for what those running backs can accomplish. To me, this is a very highly ranking offensive line in run blocking. They rank 4th to 6th with a B+ grade for run blocking. Much more average, though, in terms of pass blocking. They rank 18th to 22nd. That comes together for your 9th ranked overall offensive line. And I'm actually going to go right to left on the Falcons because the right side of the O-line is the real strength of this O-line. So you have Caleb McGarry, who's a very good right tackle. He is a great run blocker and an average pass blocker. But he has developed really well over the last couple of years, was a first-round pick that struggled early and has really settled in as just pretty much what they're paying him as a very good overall right tackle. You don't really have any questions there. In the drop-back passing game, though, there are his inconsistencies as a pass blocker. So he's kind of the first nod towards them ranking much higher as a run-blocking unit than as a pass-blocking unit. But at right guard, you have arguably the best guard in the NFL in Chris Lindstrom. He's in the convo, but I do think he is the best run-blocking guard for sure, especially inside a wide zone blocking system where his athleticism, his ability to, whether it's reach a defensive lineman that's a gap and a half or 2 gaps ahead of him, or to get to the second level and have the athleticism to stay in front of linebackers and safeties, it's unparalleled in the NFL. And guess what type of run scheme is coming in with this Sean McVay-inspired offense? An outside zone run scheme. So it shouldn't be too different there. And then he is still a very plus pass protector, but isn't quite in that elite territory in terms of pass blocking efficiency. You will see him lose. I don't find it to be for one specific reason or another. It's just for a guy that is viewed as potentially the best guard in the NFL. This isn't like Zach Martin that we're talking about in terms of like, yeah, you just don't get past him in pass protection. But he obviously elevates this group a good bit. And then at center, you have Drew Dahlman, who is, I mean, for any Vikings fans following Kirk over here to Atlanta, he's Garrett Bradbury, an undersized, uber-athletic, wide zone blocking center. If he's left one-on-one in pass protection, you better get rid of that ball quickly. He is going to get pushed back in the pocket, struggles to hang on any sort of rip move, or if he gets hit from one side on a stunt, like he just is not much of a factor there at all. In fact, he's a liability in pass protection. But you live with that because for him to be your pivot point for all of these wide zone blocks or to get on the move off of play action and reset a moving pocket, being that middle piece of a moving offensive line, he's great at it. And the system protects a guy like this by making sure that, you know, a quarter or a third of all of your passing attempts are play action, where he's able to get east and west instead of having to block north and south much more. So he is the definition of a scheme-dependent player, but they're still going to be running that scheme here. So I'm expecting them to get the same play that they've gotten from him as a plus run blocker and a below average pass blocker. They got Matthew Bergeron at left guard. Year one was definitely a mixed bag, just kind of all over the place, kind of what you would expect for a second round guard, sliding from tackle into guard. I don't really have any strong opinions on him yet. I wasn't impressed by his tape. I wasn't worried about him off his tape. He took his losses in both phases, held his own plenty of times. I thought he was a solid draft pick. Arrows should be pointing up on him. I like that he gets to stay with the continuity, with everybody still in place, the scheme the same. Theoretically, should only get better, and no reason to believe he can't, but you are hoping he can take a step up from what he was last year, because he was, you know, a replacement level / below average starting guard for them. So he's kind of your question mark here. And then Jake Matthews at left tackle. Established veteran, you know what you're getting there. He's incredibly technically sound in pass protection. Not the most athletically gifted guy. He doesn't have incredible length or wild range in his kick slides, or as a run blocker, he's certainly not what like Chris Lindstrom and Drew Dahlman are as athletes, but has a good targeting system on the move as well. They like to pull him a lot because he is such a smart dude. He's very assignment sound and will find the right guy out in space. Good on screens and that kind of stuff too. But he's kind of the one guy in this offensive line that is a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker. And for that to be your left tackle, that definitely makes sense, especially for a immobile 36-year-old right-handed throwing quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. And then he can fire through the depth. The one guy I kind of like as depth is Storm Norton. Has gotten better in the NFL, was originally acquired via the first look at the XFL before it got shut down for COVID. But he was originally acquired by the Chargers, started a full season there, really struggled in 2021, went to a backup role, and then came back in a couple starts for the Falcons last year and looked pretty good. I like him as a backup. He's 30 years old, a lot of length, tough dude. I think as a backup tackle, you could do a lot worse. It definitely falls off after him. I would have a lot of concerns about your guard and center depth. Kyle Hinton is very unproven. Following Kirk Cousins over here from Minnesota, Javon Gwynn was a 7th-round pick last year, hasn't played. Definitely didn't think he was very good coming out. Unproven types beyond that in Ryan Newsill, Zach Bailey, John LeGlue. So you got to keep that interior healthy as they were last year. Beyond Storm Norton for tackle depth, they do have Tyler Vrabel, who also got a start last year and held his own. Notable because he is Mike Vrabel's son, and I certainly wouldn't want a Vrabel punching me 65 times a game. If he has half the toughness of his dad, he's going to turn into a good backup in the league. Then you got Andrew Swaber, was drafted by, testing my memory here, but I think the Patriots. Troublesome pass protector coming out. And then Julian Davenport, who once upon a time was a quasi-starter in the league. It's been a while since then. So tackle depth better than guard depth. But obviously, I think this is a very good offensive line. Again, they rank as my 9th best overall offensive line. Much more of a run-blocking unit than a pass-blocking unit. But they're not turnstiles in pass protection either. I think for the most part, you want Bergeron and Dahlman helping each other. Give Caleb McGarry some chip help. And trust Jake Matthews and Chris Lindstrom to do their job, and lean on the scheme to, with play action and that stuff to protect these guys as well. So definitely yet another strength for an offense that we can wrap up. Obviously, a really impressive unit, and the key reason why I like the Falcons this year. They rank 14th in passing game for me, and even higher in run game. 6th in run game, showing some very serious expectations for Bijan Robinson and company to really take a lot of pressure off of the passing game as well. This should be a really well-run unit, better than we've seen in the Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota run of things here. And really your only question is Kirk Cousins' health coming off the Achilles. But let's talk defense. The tone certainly takes a shift here, especially because we have to start with the defensive line. Certainly not my favorite unit in the league. I have the Falcons ranking 27th to 28th for overall defensive line, even worse for pass rush, tied for the worst pass rush in the league. Ouch. And much better for D-line run defense. That is something that this D-line can at least hang their hat on. They are above average defending the run, though not elite or anything like that, but relative to the rest of the league, still well above average with a B- grade there. And C- with the pass rush, C for overall defensive line in terms of the grades. But let's start with the edge group. This is really where the problems come in. I mean, you just really don't have anybody here. This is where you look back at the draft and free agency and you're like, okay, we're going to run it back with Lorenzo Carter, Arnold Ebiketie, and then count on some kind of day 2 draft picks. All right. It's about as bad as anybody's got it in terms of edge rush. I think your best guy right now is Lorenzo Carter. Played well last year. Really took a step up as a run defender. I mean, he's a great athlete. He's a try-hard. He's got quick feet. You love that side of things. As a pass rusher, though, I mean, he's going to get you 4 to 6 sacks and maybe 30 pressures just because he's out there playing and he's such an athlete. And, on stunts and blitzes, like, he can find his way to the quarterback eventually through effort and athleticism. But He fell to the third round out of Georgia because he didn't have much of a skill set. And in 6 years in the NFL, that skill set has never developed. It's not going to happen at this point at 29 years old. He's a high-effort athlete out there. If he was a third piece, you'd love him. With him being your best edge rusher, you hate it. Arnold Ebiketie, though, heading into year 3, he might have some more upside in there, but I'm not betting on it. To be fair, he did show a lot more flashes last year. Had some games out there like against Washington and Minnesota where he started to show the part and then continued to just not really get on the field, disappeared for the last 2 months of the season. Heading into year 3 now as a second-round pick, there's just like a little something missing with him, whether it's traits or health, a lack of power. I did like him as a prospect, but it's just really tough to count on him to be a real impact out there. I would love to put the up arrow on him and count on him to take a step and emerge as something closer to like a real number 2 edge rusher for this team. But until kind of proven otherwise, I would say he, like Lorenzo Carter, is best as a third guy that you can rotate in, keep fresh, get you 15, 20 pass rush snaps in a game. The other thing is he's just a very abysmal run defender, which has hurt his playing time as well. So I think those 2 guys are your primary starters, but will rotate around. Zach Harrison is a hybrid defensive end. So Raheem Morris has liked to run a lot of base 3-4, a lot of base 5-1, where he has a pair of, one guy's as a 3-tech, one guy's as a 4-eye, kind of those hybrid defensive end types. And I like Zach Harrison in that role. He played a lot more edge last year in more of a 4-2 type of defense under Ryan Nielsen. I think I prefer him in that type of defense. Kind of a new position for him to learn if he's going to, play 3-tech and in between the tackles a little bit more. He has the size to play that role, but did play really well against the run last year. I think took to his Calais Campbell mentorship very well, and I think they will lean on him on early downs, especially much more than Arnold Ebiketie because of the run defense. As a pass rusher, he does have the traits, was a highly recruited dude at Ohio State, just never really put it all together from a consistency standpoint, so hard to count on that and hard for him to emerge as anything more than number 3 as well. But a nice player, nonetheless. And then you got Braylon Trice. He's going to have to earn some more snaps here as a rookie, but I think can very well get into this rotation. I liked him where they got him in the 3rd round. Hyper-productive dude at Washington. A ton of energy as a pass rusher. Goes for the bull rush with above average results. He's strong, but below average arm length and overall get off and just raw power. So I don't expect him to be a dominant bull rusher in the NFL. And he wasn't in college either. He won a lot with, mixing in rips and has quick feet to win on some inside-outside counters. So, he's a crafty, useful pass rusher. For a guy that was a little bigger, was very frustrating to watch in the run game. I don't know if he was just saving his energy for pass rush downs where he played with his hair on fire, or just wasn't seeing it in the backfield or what, but really bad run defense tape. So that's going to make it harder for him to get on the field as well. But I do think as a 3rd round pick, edge rusher, what you're typically aiming for there are either freaky athletic project types that might have high upside, or you're hoping for a rotational number 3 edge that can be a useful player on 15, 20 snaps for you. So that makes it 4 number 3 type edge rushers for the Falcons. And then you get to Brandon Dorlus, 4th round pick, very much a hybrid skill set, a very nice pass rushing skill set. Swims as a complement to the power, good athlete. It's just a matter of him earning the playing time, finding a role within this defense. Is he an early down 4-eye in some of those base looks to get on the field a little bit more? It's a crowded interior in terms of 3rd down pass rush snaps, and I think he's got to get ahead of Zach Harrison in a lot of those snaps, so they're going to have to sort that through. I don't know how much we see from him in his rookie season, but for a 4th round pick, I thought he has potential to be a nice utility player and a bit of a matchup piece on a D line. Probably not someone that's ever going to emerge as a full-time starter, though. Then you got D'Angelo Malone, another third-round pick from 3 or 4 years ago at this point, but he was in that sort of raw developmental traits-based prospect category, and nothing has clicked for him. Maybe in a shit or get off the pot situation here, he can finally show some of that potential they drafted off of him, but not counting on that at all. He's been really tough to watch when he's been on the field, which hasn't been much. And then Bradley Anai was a high floor day 3 prospect way back when. Has bounced around a little bit. Hasn't stuck. But I think you can see where the pessimism for this pass rush comes from when that's your edge group. You don't even have a number 2, let alone a number 1. And I would argue you don't have the upside for someone to emerge as even a number 2, barring maybe an Arnold Ebiketie surprise. The interior is better, but not great. You have David Onyemata, who they paid, and is, for what it's worth, a great run defender. Really high effort dude, excellent pad level, good athlete, entered the league as a 4th-round pick from Canada and has had to earn every snap in the NFL and still plays with that energy. I love what he does as a run defender, and he's got a variety of ways to win as a rusher. He's got a little bit of power, a little bit of finesse. He's a really good player. He is a saving grace for this defensive line. Thank God they at least have him. But even him, he's like in a best case scenario, he's like a 2B, and he started hot as a pass rusher last year, but really cooled off down the stretch. So for him to be your best pass rusher is really tough. Like in a worst case scenario, you want your best pass rusher to be someone that opposing teams feel like they have to double, and that's not David Onyemata. I mean, he'll beat you, but if you got a pretty good guard, you're very comfortable leaving him one-on-one with Onyemata. Then you got Grady Jarrett. He's a big wild card for this team, is what he looks like. I think if this pass rush is going to overachieve from being where I have them ranked as the worst pass rush in the league, it's Grady Jarrett at 31 years old, coming off an ACL injury, getting back to form a little bit. But even then, you look at how he was playing before the ACL, how he's played the last 3 years. He just, for a while now, has not been the Grady Jarrett that 2-3 years ago I would sit here and pound the table and be like, you guys don't realize how underrated Grady Jarrett is. I don't know that I would say he's underrated at this point. I think he's rated. He's someone I still expect to be a good player, but it is tough. How much explosiveness is he going to have at that age coming off such a significant knee injury? And can he stay on the field? When at his best, though, he is a difference maker and a two-way player. He's uniquely built. He's one of these defensive tackles that we like to refer to with these shorter defensive tackles where he's, about 6 foot, 310 pounds, really low to the earth, always winning the leverage battle. And he's got quick feet. He's got remarkable core balance and core power. Can beat you with the bull rush, can beat you laterally as a rusher, wins with quick steps and sneaking underneath blocks and knifing into the backfield as a run defender, but can get off blocks as well because he's always got hands inside and is really strong. So at his best, he is this team's best defensive tackle, but to project him to be that is a real challenge, especially when you can argue we've already seen some physical regression from him before his knee broke down. So definitely a wild card for this defense, and that knee injury I think is definitely a reason they drafted Ruka Rororo. They go right back to the well. Grady Jarrett out of Clemson, Rook out of Clemson. And not entirely dissimilar. I think Rook, likewise with Grady Jarrett, has a lot of the same nice things you would say about him, where he's not the biggest guy, but he is remarkably strong pound for pound and plays with great pad level, was a really good run defender at Clemson. I think can translate to being a good run defender in the NFL as well. The difference is I don't think he's nearly as refined as a pass rusher as Grady Jarrett. Rook has some upside as a pass rusher, but I didn't love that he was already 23 and still so raw. Most of his pass rush wins were just effort and athleticism, those kind of late wins, 2, sometimes 3 seconds into the play where eventually he's able to break down the block and get after the quarterback. But for someone that tested as well as he did, I wanted to see more athleticism on tape, frankly, and I wanted to see some just better pass rush moves that were winning more efficiently. So when they came up to get him in the draft, I was pretty floored, especially that they took him over a potential difference maker in Jer'Jon Newton. When I talk about how underwhelmed I was by their draft, I mean, again, the Penix thing was weird, but the Rook pick was even weirder because I felt like they could have reinforced the Penix pick by getting a difference-making defensive player, and they went with a guy in Rook that I think is, stop me if you've heard this before, but I think he's a number 3. I think he can eat up a lot of downs as a part of a rotation, but I just don't see someone that now at 24 years old is going to really kick into gear and be a difference maker for this team. So it's nice to have that depth, but for a top 40 pick that you traded up to get him, that's a tough sell for me. In fact, Taquan Graham is someone that is not a horrible pro comp for a guy like Ruka Row. I like what we've seen from Taquan Graham. I think he was a nice contributor to what was a really underrated run defense last year. I think he really fits this front as well. We've talked a lot about that 4-eye, 3-tech piece for base 3-4 or for those 5-1 fronts. I really like Taquan Graham in that role. Just like we said with Rook, he is very compact, plays low to the earth, good shed strength. I wouldn't be surprised if Taquan Graham outsnaps Rook, and ultimately as someone we look back on, it's like, man, why did they take such a redundant piece when they could have swung for some more upside? That's just my take on it. Really hope I'm wrong, and Rook can turn into a quality starter, which you're hoping to get with a high second-round pick that you traded up for. And then you got LaCale London, another guy that was really underrated, popped for me on film, came on late for this Falcons team. I think he makes this team, even though it's a new coaching staff. He's the only guy that brings legit size. Now, they list him at like 285. To me on film, he looked a lot bigger than that. But he really does round out some good depth in terms of run defense. These guys might not be established starters by any stretch of the imagination, but for third, fourth, fifth guys off the bench to bring some high energy and get you into third downs, I like that. Then you do have Contavious Street. He's been kind of a hybrid interior rush specialist with Dorless and Harrison on the roster. Not sure if he makes the team. And then they spent a draft pick on Zion Logue. I don't know why, other than the hometown bias. His tape was brutal for what you expect for a Georgia defensive tackle. I did not have a draftable grade on him. But it's a lot of bodies. It's going to be a big rotation, just as it was last year for a different staff. And I do think as a run defending unit, they'll get the job done. But you better count on blitzes and stunts and schemed up pass rush if you want any sort of pressure on the quarterback here in Atlanta. It's a massive concern for this defense, but this team overall. But let's go through the rest of the defense. We got the linebackers next, and we kind of got to look at this from two angles because right now they're actually listing Troy Anderson as the number 2, whereas last year that was not the case. Nate Landman was the number 2 and played pretty well. So that's a camp battle. I'm going to show this group and how they rank both ways. Needless to say, though, it's higher with Landman. I'll review that at the end. But this does center around Caden Ellis, who was a brilliant signing for this team. Super underrated linebacker. He's a good 3-down linebacker. Better as a run defender, where he's a heat-seeking missile with a ton of size. At this point, really good in his keys. He's developed, he was really comfortable in Nielsen's defense. He followed him over from New Orleans, and that was I think a key cog in this team being really what was a very good run defense last year. They were about top 10 in run defense last year by pretty much any metric you want to look at. They might have been even higher. And I think Ellis played a big part of that. But a useful coverage player as well. He's an above-average athlete. Ball production is lacking, but he certainly doesn't feel like someone you can draw out of position and constantly manipulate. In general, grades out and yards allowed and all that kind of stuff is very average to above average for Caden Ellis. So not really worried about the coverage, even if he's not an impact player there. He's this team's number one, and I would say he's a top 16 linebacker in the NFL that could be even proving more than that. He's also a really good blitzing threat as well. He played that kind of Sam linebacker role in New Orleans before given a starting contract and a starting opportunity for Atlanta. And in that role, he blitzed off the edge quite a lot. They blitzed him here in Atlanta last year, and he was one of their more efficient pass rushers last year. So really complete player. I like Caden Ellis a lot. And then, yeah, we've got a competition, it seems, at LB2. I'm going to break it down with Nate Landman first because I think it is going to be tough for them to not start him based on how he played last year. Undrafted dude out of Colorado. So he joined this team at the same time Troy Anderson did, who was a second-round pick in that same draft class. But, he's just taken this job, and I didn't think he was looking back, but they're seemingly toying with maybe going with Anderson here. But, yeah, dude, he is the definition of a strong, try-hard, hard-hitting, undrafted linebacker. He has an aesthetic that is very fun to watch. He reminds me a lot of Alex Singleton, who has, and maybe a little bit of TJ Edwards, these undrafted guys that slipped through the cracks, had to really scratch and claw for all their opportunities, play every single snap like it's their last, and the end result is pretty good linebacker tape. Reminds me so much of those guys. So personally, I would just stick with him. He's not the athlete that Troy Anderson is, and he certainly isn't the potential coverage player that Troy Anderson is. In fact, if you want him off the field, it is because of the coverage, but I think you can shelter some of that stuff a little bit as well in dime packages and just, not complicating his role too much. I don't know. It'll be interesting, but if it is Anderson, you are talking about much more of that truly raw, traits-based type of prospect. And I'm not trying to question the Falcons if they want to start Troy Anderson. I would fully understand that side of things too, where they're like, well, we got a new defense coming in. We spent a second-round pick on this guy. We knew it was going to take some time for Troy Anderson, and his physical tools are just really hard to not give him a chance. And I understand that side of things too, but the film has not been good when he's been out there. And I like Troy Anderson coming out, but played at Montana State, played some running back for them. But unfortunately, to this point in time, he hasn't been able to translate to the NFL level. His missed tackle percentage is unstartable. That's really what's gotten him off the field here. He missed 4 tackles in 2 starts last year, 22% missed tackle percentage. In his rookie year, in 480 snaps, was a little better, but 11.5% missed tackle percentage is below average. Doesn't have the mental processing to complement his athleticism. Seems he gets to the ball even slower than a guy like Nate Landman, even if he's way faster. He's starting from 2 steps behind because he triggers late. And for such a freak athlete, he's been picked on in coverage and doesn't have a single pass breakup or interception in his 600 or so career snaps. So this does really come down to a good old floor versus ceiling decision for the Falcons. And it'll be wait and see. In terms of ranking out these 2 different combinations, with Nate Landman, I have the Falcons ranking above average at linebacker with a B- grade, 14th to 16th overall for linebacker. Lower in coverage, 21st to 26th, but excellent in run defense, ranking in a tier that gets them 4th to 11th in the NFL. So near the top of the league for run defense from these linebackers. And remember, this run defense was really good last year. Having this duo was a big asset for this team. So if you replace Landman with the unproven Anderson, it doesn't change their coverage grade because Landman hasn't shown anything in coverage either. Neither has Anderson. But that dip in run defense drops them all the way down to a below average ranking of 20th to 26th. Caden Ellis can only do so much to compensate for a guy that's been nothing short of a liability to this point in 2 years. But again, I can't fully fault the Falcons if they want to get that young super athlete out there as they transition to a different defensive scheme anyway. Really only time will tell. And it could be like last year too, where Anderson's out there week 1, he struggles, and then they go to Landman. They have that flexibility to do that as well. I do want to talk about J.D. Bertrand as well. They spent a day 3 pick on him. I liked J.D. Bertrand. He stood out to me in his Notre Dame tape. When you're filling out your draft board, getting through these 15, 20 or so, day 3 or undrafted caliber linebackers, really those guys don't stand out for the most part. But JT Bertrand did for me. I ended up bumping him up the board. I think he ultimately made my top 10 linebackers list. Not a great athlete, not a sensational player, but I liked his tape. He was balanced, seemed to know what he was doing in every phase, was a good blitzer. A lot of Drew Tranquil in his game was kind of the pro comp I came up with him, and he's gradually gotten better and is a good player for the Chiefs. Could see that in JT Bertrand. Not a lot of opportunity for him right now, but certainly someone to keep an eye on down the road. Overall, they have options. It just, I think, comes down to their risk tolerance on Anderson, and if they prefer the high floor with the run defense or the potentially more balanced duo if Anderson could be a hit. And then you get to the secondary, and it's a little bit all over the place. I mean, you got players I like, and then you have some young players that are just entirely unproven, and you might have some weak links in the secondary. As far as the rankings, they end up in that big middle cluster that ranks 10th to 18th, which is basically a bunch of like above average secondaries that have a question or two, and that's where the Falcons are. Now, those questions don't come with AJ Terrell, who is definitely not just the Falcons' number 1 corner, but a number 1 corner. He is of that caliber that if he's your best guy, you're more than comfortable with it. I think the only question on AJ Terrell is, can he find that sophomore season, that 2021 form back, where he was arguably the best corner in the NFL? The last 2 years, I think he's played well. I think he has sustained the level of play that you hope for from a number 1 corner, but there have been more bad games, more bad reps, more ugly moments than certainly what you would say from a top 5 or maybe even top 10 corner. And you might be critical of the 0 interceptions over the last 2 years, but that's certainly not a major concern when he's still had 8 pass breakups in each of the last 2 seasons. But anything short of trying to claim he's, an elite corner or maybe a top 5 to 8 corner, and I would say I really like AJ Terrell. I like his tape. He's physical. He's a great man corner. Gives you that flexibility if you want to like really shadow around number 1s. They don't necessarily do that a ton with him, but if there's a certain matchup that you want to do that with him, he can do that. Smart dude. You don't see a ton of coverage busts in zone. Love the way he tackles and comes downfield. Again, your question marks in this secondary have nothing to do with AJ Terrell, and he's a reason that they still rank near that, midpoint in the league for secondary grade. But after that, I mean, Clark Phillips is potentially this team's number 2 outside corner right now. And it's pretty crazy that we're there with him. 4th round rookie last year, was a very nice high floor, smart but slower and undersized corner that did fall to the 4th round because of the lack of physical traits. And he was primarily a slot at Utah. But they put him out there on the outside in the second half of last year, and he held up okay. Not going to say he was great, but for a rookie corner, 4th round rookie corner at that, he held his own as like a replacement level option for them. And it's just really hard to know what you're going to get from him. I think you could be positive and say, well, Raheem Morris has dealt with a bunch of undersized corners, has frankly targeted those guys with the Rams. They can play off zone with him, protect his lack of size. and get away with him as their number 2, and he might have a nice year too. He's a really smart player. You loved his anticipation at Utah. But you could go the other way and say, well, he just does not have the tools to play on the outside. If he gets matched up with any sort of big or fast wide receiver, it's over. And you could get some ugliness from him there too. So someone in the comments from the last video recommended we do a yellow sideways arrow for players that are more polarizing, could go up or could go down. I think Clark Phillips fits that description. He played okay in his rookie year, but I think he could potentially play worse in a larger sample size, but could play better for some of those reasons we described. We just don't know. And we don't even know if he's going to start. Because before we talk about D. Alford in the slot, I kind of like Antonio Hamilton for what he is. 31-year-old, savvy outside veteran corner. 3 years ago, he was a problem piece for the Cardinals, but he stuck onto that starting job for so long and in time just got beat a lot less, made more plays, settled in as like a very capable starting outside corner for the Cardinals last year that, no corner had any business playing well at all, given how bad that pass rush was there. So I would not be the least bit surprised if he beats out Clark Phillips. I don't think that changes the secondary grade. It might raise the floor a little bit, but it's not like that's some stud number 2 corner or anything close to a proven commodity at all. But then it should be D. Alford as the slot corner. He's really good there. He's had to earn this opportunity, came into the league undrafted, but he's got the athleticism. He's got really good anticipation. He has flashed some really good moments in coverage. I actually like him as a slot corner. The only thing is he is undersized. So he can lose at the catch point at times. And from a run defense perspective, I'm not going to lie, I do like to have a little bit more meat from these guys where if you're in a nickel defense, they can slide towards the line of scrimmage a little bit more and be more of a presence against the run. You just don't get that with D. Alford. And the tackling consistency towards the sideline is going to be hit or miss too, because he's just going to struggle to wrap up with his slender frame. So there's a downside to him, but from a coverage perspective, I do like what we've seen. Just has to keep proving it though, because he did come into the league undrafted and has yet to give us a full season as a starter. As far as any depth beyond that, we mentioned Hamilton, but you got Mike Hughes, a CB5 at this point in his career. That's fine. I just don't want to see him starting. And then Kevin King, it's funny that they gave him any money. I mean, he was the liability of all liabilities for those Packers defenses over the years. Maybe in a dime back role if they really don't like Richie Grant, where in his final year in Green Bay, he kind of switched to more of a safety type of assignment and was a little better. But as a corner, where he's currently listed, absolutely not. And then you got 5 undrafted types hanging out on the roster as well. So obvious questions there, specifically with CB2. And then at safety, you got Jesse Bates. You got to spend some time praising the best safety in the NFL. And I think, we've been debating who's the best safety for a while now. And it's kind of bounced around, Bayard for a little bit, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Bates for a little bit, maybe Derwin snuck his name in the ring for a little bit. But it's never been more clear for a while who the best safety in the NFL is. It is Jesse Bates. And I think his production on the field for the Falcons, his impact on the field for the Falcons, game-changing interceptions, cutting off crossing routes that could have been really big plays, continuing to prove that he's a better run defender than he tends to get credit for, coming down field, being a really consistent tackler, taking great angles, taking on blocks even when he needs to. So not only the impact he made for this Falcons defense that in many ways overachieved last year, but you also look at how bad things got in Cincinnati when he left, and I think you realize how big of an impact he had on Cincy. And I think that's pretty telling of the type of impact he has. Just great range, rare anticipation, great ball skills. This should not be a debate. Jesse Bates is the best safety in the NFL. And I called this the best signing of last year's offseason. that aged very well. And you look at now, like Xavier McKinney, nice player, go Packers and all that, but Xavier McKinney got more than Jesse Bates got in free agency. It's pretty funny to look back on like how big of a bargain this was. Bates probably deserves a little bit of a pay raise from Atlanta, honestly, with how the safety market kind of blew up this year. Something to keep an eye on within the next, season and a half or so. I wouldn't be surprised if he asks for a little bit more money because he has absolutely earned it. And you look at a lot of these weaknesses in the secondary and see them rank out still pretty well for secondary, and he's a big part of that. Now, the other safety is a complete question mark. Right now, they're listing DeMarco Hellams as the starter. He overtook former second-round pick Richie Grant as the starter in the last 6 weeks of last season, and as of right now, it looks like he's not going to look back from that. He was a day 3 rookie pick out of Alabama, and he grew on me in the draft process. If we think back to what he was as a prospect, where my first impression of him, and I think from many people, was his game against Tennessee, where it was arguably the worst safety performance I've ever seen from a college safety. He got burnt on double moves against Jalen Hyatt and company, and lost them that game. But when you start to watch some other Alabama games, you see more DeMarco Hellams, and you're like, okay, he's actually not that bad. He anticipates routes. He hits really hard coming downfield. Really nice first step. Had much better games out there than the Tennessee game. But that individual game in a big spot that kind of cost Alabama a national championship did probably cost him 2 rounds of draft position. But to the Falcons' benefit, they trusted the other games. And for him to get on the field in his rookie year was impressive. And, he's got his limitations. I do think he is very aggressive, obviously, in coverage. And he's not the most incredible fluid athlete or anything like that. But with Jesse Bates being a guy that's going to be the primary free safety, this team is probably going to run a lot of cover 3, with Hellams kind of being more of that buzz defender, curl flat defender in cover 3. I think he can make some plays from that assignment, help against the run. And if he does bust or gets over aggressive and finds himself out of position, those aren't assignments that can compromise your defense. So I like him within this role. It's just very unproven. And it's not like he was an impactful coverage player when he stepped on the field, but he was better than what Richie Grant did last year, where he was just brutal. I mean, they had to bench him. Their defense got better when they did bench him. He was better the year before in terms of coverage, showed a lot more promise. So you're kind of hanging your hat on that. But he's been an abysmal run defender, has been getting just kind of like dominated at the catch point. He's a small guy, lacks the traits, and I think at this point is going to lose this job to DeMarco Hellams and maybe settle in a bit of a dime back role. I still think he has some potential in that role because he's got a little bit of a slot corner background, still has some instincts in that part of the field. But even then, it's like they might be better off. God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but they might be better off with Kevin King in that role. The last time Kevin King played that role as a dime back, it was better than what Richie Grant did last year, which is saying a lot for how bad he played last year. But that's kind of where you're at in terms of the safety competition and next guy in that group. I would love to see this be a Justin Simmons team. Pair him with Jesse Bates, have the best safety duo in the league. I would love to see that. Would probably boost this up to a B coverage grade for this secondary, and I think that would probably get them up a spot or 2 in the power rankings as well. But yeah, they got good players, just potential weak spots as well. Makes a lot of sense that they kind of rank in the middle of the league for secondary. But let's wrap up this defense in sum. So much better in run defense than they are in pass defense, kind of like last year. 28th in pass defense, but 12th in run defense. Now that still spit them out as the 28th ranked defense, funny enough. It's just because from like 12 to 25, these run defenses are very tightly knit, whereas they are a good bit behind in pass defense. So math is weird sometimes. I know it looks strange. You would think it would at least be like 25th in defense if they're 28th in pass defense and 12th in run defense. But that's where the formula spit them out in the end. Let's talk a little special teams before we summarize all of this and then take a look at the schedule and my win total expectations for the Falcons. But they came out 27th on special teams. Now, don't take it up with me. You can take it up with PFF and the people that do the DVOA rankings, because even though the Falcons have a really good kicker in Young Hoku, who was worse last year than he was the year before, that's for sure, but also the second highest ranked punter over the last 2 years in Bradley Pinion, even though their specialists have been really good here, their PFF team grade was 30th and their DVOA team grade was 27th. So we have our formula here, and it's just how they came out. I would bet that they will finish above that just because their specialists are good, and you would think things regress back to the mean a little bit in terms of whether it's fumbles or block punts or block kicks or all that stuff. But there have been some special teams issues that they need to clean up moving forward. But obviously, as we look back on everything we've talked about, this is going to be an offensive-oriented team. There is a lot of pressure on Kirk Cousins and these weapons to be the top 10 offense that we're ranking them as here, 9th on offense. And Raheem Morris has a lot of work to do. He's got some pieces to work with. If they could be more of a 20th ranked defense, I would say that's what you're paying Raheem Morris to do. But even then, I'm not counting on him to be able to do that based on what we've seen from him and from this roster. But even with the 28th ranked defense, I do think this offense is good enough that it does get them into the top 16 in my rankings as the best team in the NFC South. But as we look back at their strengths and weaknesses, and more specifically where their wild cards are, those pivotal factors that might decide the fate of this Falcons team this year, those wild cards are Kirk Cousins' recovery. Just how good is he, and can he stay healthy coming off that Achilles injury? Likewise with Grady Jarrett, one of their best defensive players at 31 years old, coming off an ACL injury at a defensive line that really needs some help. What can they get from him? And then I think the coaching staff in general is a huge wild card for this team, not just offensively with Zach Robinson, first-time play caller. Could he be really good and just be another one of these ascending McVay minds, shatter my C rankings of him as a coach? Yes, absolutely. Could he get here and was unqualified and only hired because he works for Sean McVay? Maybe. But not just him. Honestly, I think the defensive coaching as well is a wild card, and not in the sense that I think it could be a weakness, but could Raheem Morris get here and prove that he is a premium defensive mind? And if that's the case, you're talking about a guy that could elevate this to being more of a top 20 defense, which would be a game changer based on what we think about their offense. So I think the overall coaching and the unprovenness of it is actually a wild card for this team. But they do have some strengths, certainly to hang their hat on. The dynamic weaponry, the running back room, the run blocking, so much to work with offensively. And I do think the overall run defense, especially if they decide to go with Landman at linebacker, but they can always fall back on that if Anderson struggles as well. But yeah, I think the overall run defense is certainly a strength for this team, as it was last year. Might not be quite as good in a different system, and without Calais Campbell, but still should be pretty good. The weaknesses, though, pass rush, I don't know how you could argue otherwise. It looks ugly. And then holes in the secondary. I mean, even if you love Terrell and Bates, there's some guys that you can probably pick on in this secondary, and they're going to have to coach around that for sure, unless, guys like Clark Phillips and Helms just really surprise. But let's finish up by taking a look at their schedule and where my projection comes in on them. It is an easy schedule. That is one of the selling points on the Falcons, frankly, and on, the kind of idea that Kirk on a short window is going to be a good move for this team, especially this year. We know their division is booty cheeks, and then they play the AFC West. That's favorable as well. That is the worst division in the AFC easily. 3 teams that ranked in the 20s for us, with the Raiders, the Broncos, and the Chargers. And then their NFC matchup is the NFC East, which is probably the division you would want to play if you were given the option of Northwest and East. at least get those 2 games against Washington and the New York Giants. So it really doesn't get any easier in terms of schedule. But the thing is, that's priced into their over-under. Their over-under is 9.5 wins. The people in the desert know this is an easy schedule too. So, I mean, you got to bet on them to win 10 games. If you're going to make money on this, it's, there's just better bets out there. But I do lean over. My projection on this, based on the math, has them right at 9.5. So it's a very sharp line. My math agrees with Las Vegas's math, right? But if I had to bet it, I think I lean over, but I do think there's better bets out there as well. I mean, hell, this team could still win 9 games and make the playoffs and kind of look back on this season being somewhat of a success because their division is that bad. And that's also reflected in their division odds, where they are first in this division and they are odds-on favorites, minus 120. You bet $50 on the Falcons to win this division, you don't even get even money. You're winning like $40 off of that bet. So they are heavy favorites to win this division. I think they should be, personally. But I think that the market is very much right in line with where I've got them. They're even 13th in Super Bowl odds. I kind of get it because they're saying their probability of going to the playoffs is about as high as most teams just because of their division. So that helps the odds a little bit in terms of Super Bowl. But still, I mean, can this team get through the top teams in the NFC? That's a lot to ask. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but that's not the bet I would make. I think if I were to rank this, I would say give me the division odds, then the over-under, then the Super Bowl odds, but you're probably not getting a lot of value from a betting perspective either way you slice it. But that is going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below if I missed anything, what you think of the ranking. Did I sell you on the Falcons, or am I too high on them? Or am I too low on the Falcons? Let me know all of it down below. Who do you think comes next in the power rankings as well at the 15 spot? Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that video when it drops. And please do hit that like button on the way out. I really appreciate it. That's all we got. We'll see you later. Peace out.